and I've entitled today's act of worship as. Oh, here we are.
Oh, sorry.
Don't worry about it, Brian. Cheers. I've entitled this morning's act. You've literally walked in. I've name checked you already, but you've literally walked in. I've entitled this morning's act of worship, "What's the point?" And if you think you're going to get an answer by the end of today, I suggest you go next door.
Well, because there's nobody there.
Well, if there had been some. So I just want to light the chalice with that in mind. Human beings are desperate to find meaning. Meaning and purpose is part of what we are, and yet what the meaning and purpose is and can be so elusive. As is Latin display. Got it. So as we light this chalice, let us hold on to our search for purpose, our search for meaning, knowing as well that possibly it isn't there. So I'm going to say something which may. I do something that often creates a lot of hostility in others. Don't worry, it's not too worrying. It's something which I don't know why people should really take against. It's like when people say they're vegans, everybody gets really annoyed.
Yeah.
I play golf.
Oh dear.
You see, it has that impact on people, and I know the quote by Dr. Johnson. It's a war ruin. But I love playing golf, and I've got lots of children, but I've got a sporty one, and he plays rugby union and rugby league. He's given up cricket, but he's taken up golf. He loves golf. So I was taking him around the golf course yesterday, and previous to this, I bought him some lessons. Now, if you know anything about golf, and it's the same as anything else. You have lessons and you think you'll improve, but actually you don't necessarily get better straight away. So there he is. He's had these lessons, and he's really proud. He gets on the golf course. When he goes to hit the ball, the ball goes wrong. And he genuinely didn't know the theme of what I was going to say today. He said, "What's the point? What is the point of all those lessons when it hasn't taught me anything?" And what's the point is what I wanted to talk about today. And if you think about it, we use that phrase in so many contexts. You spend ages trying to explain something to somebody who doesn't seem to understand it. And in the end, you go, "Oh, something." You tidy the kitchen. You clean the bathroom. You hoover the car. And then a messy family member comes in, messes it all up, and you think to yourself, "What's the point?" But today, of course, I want to move beyond what's the point of tidying the car, which I'm glad actually there isn't a point because I don't tidy it very often, to what's the point of life? Many people have discussed this theme, perhaps none better than the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Now here's a good question for you all. You've all heard of Nietzsche. I've had this in the criticism. Can you spell it? N-I-E-S-C-H, no?
N-I-E-T-C-H-E.
Nearly, but not quite. It is really hard.
N-I-E-T-Z-C-H-E.
Yeah, N-I-E-T-Z-C-H-E. It's obviously German, and they've got all these, put a lot of consonants together to get one sound. So Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, and he argues, kind of, I suppose, the godfather of nihilism in some ways, that there is no truth, just perspective. So there's no point rationally to everything, and yet there needs to be a point. So what I want to do for my first reading, because actually I know he's a bit Marmite as Nietzsche, and he does get blamed for Nazism, which I think is completely unfair, because he talks about the wills of power. But what I want to do is, you'll know some of these quotes, but I think they're fantastic, and so they're different quotes from Nietzsche, just this idea about whether or not there's a point to anything. So I'll just read them to you. I'll be a pause each to make sure, because I tried to find a passage and I couldn't get a passage which somebody told us. So I thought a series of quotes would look better. God is dead and remains dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. Yet his shadow still looms. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe the blood off us? What water is there for us to cleanse ourselves? You have your way, I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way, it does not exist. That which does not kill us makes us stronger. I love this next one. Made me think. I'm not upset that you lied to me. I'm upset that from now on I can't believe you. The snake which cannot cast its skin has to die. As well, the minds which are prevented from changing their opinions, they cease to be mind. Is man merely a mistake of God's, or God merely a mistake of man? There are no facts, only interpretations. In truth, there was only one Christian, and he died on the cross. Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. He who has a why to live for can bear almost any hand. The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in high esteem those who think alike and those who think differently. Faith, not wanting to know what the truth is. There are two different types of people in the world. Those who want to know and those who want to believe. Lot to think about that. And if you did one, I'm quite happy to, if anybody wanted to read those, I'm happy to email them to people, because I've dug those out and I think there's some really interesting nuggets in there. And I like that. I also like songs with strong northern accents. Yeah. So, we've had a bit of Nietzsche, we've had a bit of Yard Act, and this idea, the pointlessness of it all, appears to be modern, but there is an old book which has got a writer in it who seemed to have a similar view. Very old book, actually. You might have heard of it. It's called the Bible. And in there's a book called the Book of Ecclesiastes. Now, mainly Ecclesiastes is read for that a time to live and a time to die and all that stuff. That's all you ever hear. But actually, most of Ecclesiastes, it says it's written by Solomon, but I think it was when the people of Israel went to Babylon and they met the wisdom traditions, you get that. And then because it was wisdom, they put it into the mouth of Solomon. But here we are, and listen to this. I've taken it from the New International Version simply because I don't normally use that version, but I think they translate the Hebrew as meaninglessness, where the other translations call it vanity. So you'll see why I've chosen this translation. This is from chapter 1. The words, oh no, it's not chapter 2, I'm sorry. Earlier. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, Meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labours at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go. The earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning to its course. All streams flow into the sea, and yet the sea is not full. The place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again, what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study, to explore all wisdom, all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, look, I've increased in wisdom more than anyone who's ruled over Jerusalem before me. I've experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied myself to understanding wisdom and also of madness and folly. But I learned that this too is chasing after the wind. But with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. That's what I love about the Bible. It contradicts itself so interestingly, and yet if you want to in a particular way, you don't listen to passages like that. So let's have a think about it. What's the point? So a few weeks ago, Louise asked me if I could give a theme that we could advertise, and I just looked up my head, let's go with what's the point? And I've really enjoyed looking at that question. What's the point? Now, put that question into Google. What's the point? And what do you think comes up?
A self-help webinar.
You're not far. Yeah, that's the kind of thing. It's basically, whoa, are you thinking about committing suicide? You see what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
What's the point? So somebody is sitting there at home on their own, feeling really depressed. What's the point? And then I thought about it, and I thought, actually, I don't know whether I've mentioned this before, but I work with people who, families of people who have taken their own lives. That's basically my job now. And often they've left notes, and they will have something along the line of, what's the point? It's an existential question, and some people, faced with a reality that they can't see a point, will decide there is no point to my life, and therefore my life must end. And if you look at any mental health, self-help, it will often say that one of the key things you must have in life is a purpose and a meaning. It's very hard to function if you don't have a purpose or a meaning to life. It seems to be hardwired in human beings. And it was interesting because you and I, Dave, were having a conversation when I came in here, and you're retired. And often that's a really difficult time for people. They look forward to retirement. Oh, years. I mean, I'm at the point. I mean, I've got 6 years and a month to go, and I know exactly how long. I know. And as the older you get, I mean, when I was a kid, 6 years and a month would be eternity, but I know it's very soon. But a little bit of me is ticking it up. But I'm also aware that at the moment I have a purpose. As I've just said, I work with people I work with families of people who've taken their life, and there's a real purpose to what I do. When I come to retire, I need to find a new purpose. And as I say, it's hardwired in human beings to need a purpose. A few weeks ago, we went to the Orkney Islands, and I love the Orkney Islands. I've been many times when I was younger. I've never taken my family, my present family, so I took them. I'm not sure they were quite as impressed as I hoped they would. But Orkney
is there are lots of standing stones in Orkney. There's the Ring of Brodgar, which is a massive ring of standing stones. There's the Stones of Stenness. There's also something called Maze Howe, a remarkable burial site, which has got you go in through a tunnel into this, probably as big as this, even though it's 7,000 years old. And the sun at sunrise only on the winter solstice, 21st of December, at sunrise, if the sun is available to rise, which I don't suppose it is that often on Orkney, the light from the sun will come in and will light up that chamber on that one day. Now, nobody knows exactly why, except clearly this is some kind of sense of religion. And as far as we can see, and there's some argument about this, but it seems to me that all ancient cultures had some kind of religion. Now, that you could find some that didn't, and I know a lot of atheists are very eager to find ones that aren't, but it seems to they never satisfied me that in the ancient world people seem to have had. We don't know what these were: Stonehenges, ziggurats, pyramids, temples, altars, and whatever those religions were, they seem to me to show something of human beings' search for meaning. And so important did human beings find this search for meaning that they didn't only do it, it seemed to take up more of their resources than anything else. You just look, I mean, I've probably used this before, but you just look at Durham Cathedral. That's one. Now, Durham Cathedral, built just after the Normans arrived. People were struggling to survive. They desperately needed food, they needed water, they needed shelter. That, you would have thought, took up most of human beings' times. And yet, they spent more resources building Durham. There's nothing like it that old in the area. That's what they put their money into. The same with Stonehenge. Now, the most remarkable thing about Stonehenge to me, I've been to Stonehenge, but actually it's to go to, I forgot the name, the Pwllheli, it's not Pwllheli. There's in Pembrokeshire, they know precisely where they mined stones that make Stonehenge. Now, if you know where Pembrokeshire is, it's that bit at the very end of Wales. It's a long way from Stonehenge. And people without wheels, all they can imagine is they cut these out, they must have put them on logs, got them to the water, brought them on boats up the Bristol Channel, then somehow got them again, massive things. The human beings' hours, man hours we used to say, that would have taken them to get them and then lift them onto Stonehenge was remarkable. And these are people in ancient world again who just survival must have been so hard, but they put in so many resources into building Stonehenge. So this search for meaning, which is hardwired into human beings, which I alluded to at the beginning and thinking about mental health, seems to take up so much time. I was, as you know, a vicar. And when I was a vicar, I obviously did a lot of funerals, one stage probably 3 a week. And I was always amazed how many people said to me, oh, you know, they'd lost someone, said, I wish I had a faith like yours. This idea that when I'm under grief, if I had some kind of belief system, it would make it easier. Again, that's part of this thing. How do I... they were making assumptions about my faith, I have to say, which weren't necessarily true, but they projected onto me this person who knew the answer and the meaning to life. And yet, we know, do we not, that to have a meaning and purpose in life is absolutely crucial, and yet everybody's meaning varies so much. Go back to that wonderful quote, one of the quotes from Nietzsche. I have my way, you have your way. As for the one absolute true way, it doesn't exist. So when we look at the various religions that we know about, which seem to give answers and meaning in the East, in Buddhism and Hinduism, meaning seems to come from having asceticism, to deny yourself. Not totally, you take the middle way, but there's something about denial and about ceasing to be yourself so that you somehow, the burden of existence of being you can lose that and float into eternity. In Islam, the purpose of life is to submit yourself totally to the will of God, the will of Allah. And that's really important, by the way. People think that Muslims believe in Allah and Christians believe in God. No. Allah is just the Arabic name for God. Okay. So you submit yourself totally to the will of God, and you don't even question it. To question it is to be marked among the unbelievers, and then punishments are quite unpleasant. So you submit yourself. In Christianity, there seems to be two distinct ways: the Catholic and the Protestant or evangelical, whichever you want to call it. To the Catholic way is to belong to this thing called the church, this body of believers, and being part of that body will somehow, you will be carried. The meaning of life is being part of that because you are connected not just to the body of believers, but to God. And within the evangelical way, but you need faith. Above all else, you just have to have faith. Doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter what you think, just have faith and trust. But it also seems to, and all of that, by the way, it does seem the evidence is there that people who hold on to these faiths have better mental health. It is good for you to have these all-embracing beliefs. The problem is they contradict each other. And it's not that they are the truth, it's just holding on to them seems to be useful. However, I have a suspicion that it doesn't really matter what that faith is, it will do you good. To hold on to the faith in an all-embracing ideology, where you believe that it holds the truth, probably did you good in yourself. One of the things which people find most challenging about the Nazi era is the fact that so many people were able to commit the atrocities that happened. But I suspect it's because they believed it, absolutely. They were fine doing what they did because they absolutely had a belief system that made sense of it all. And that's why Nietzsche says that having a why completely always defeats the how. Once you have your why, you will always come up with the how. And that makes me shudder. And remember, when I started thinking about those ancient religions, and I talked about the temples and the altars, a lot of those included human sacrifice. If you think about the Christian religion, the whole notion of Jesus on the cross being the lamb that was slain ultimately goes back to a belief in human sacrifice. So, faced with that and the horror of that, some people choose either not to even think about it because it's too hard, that's probably the most normal response, or to step away and to say, well, the only meaning I can get out of my life is to enjoy myself. Pleasure. Ecclesiastes 3, if I'd gone on to that, but it'd have been a long reading, says, eat, drink, and find satisfaction in all that you do. That's the only meaning you can ever have. Pleasure. And we give that a name, it's hedonism. Now, I don't want to criticize hedonism, it's a very tempting way to go. I've always wished that when I was younger, I'd managed to kind of guiltlessly live an incredibly hedonistic lifestyle for about 5 years and given it all up. You know, that would be a good way to have lived your life. Maybe that's a male thing, I don't know. But I don't want to criticise hedonism, but it doesn't seem to work. It doesn't seem to work on its own terms. And I've often thought about this. The best way I can think about it is when I was a kid at school, okay, you'd have a knockabout at football. So we'd say, right, it's lunchtime, let's have a game of football. And you would either do it in one of two ways. You would say, let's just have a knockabout and let's just have a bit of fun. Then we'll just have a knockabout of football to enjoy ourselves. Or you'd say, right, we're going to have two teams and we're going to try and win. And I always enjoyed the games where I tried to win, even if I lost, more than just for a bit of fun. So it seems to be that just aiming for pleasure doesn't seem to work. It's not just there. When you think about hedonism, I think two things come into my mind, right? Absolute hedonism seems to me to involve mind-altering substances and sex. They're the two things that you think about when you think of hedonism. And this is the problem that hedonists seem to face, is it often leads to addiction. Many forms of addiction. And also, of course, if you are utterly hedonistic, then it's all about your own pleasure, and then you find it very hard to have long-term sustaining relationships, because something we also crave are exactly that, long-term friendships and relationships. But if we are going to have long-term friendships and relationships, it means self-sacrifice, and that goes against the notion of hedonism. Buddhism, I think, comes in with a really useful answer to this called the middle way. And I like something I read recently. The middle way, you know, the idea of you don't have too much, you don't have too little. I like this, is to stand somewhere between the spoilsports and the guzzlers. And I think, yeah, that's the middle way, isn't it? I don't want to be a spoilsport, and I don't want to be a guzzler. I have to say, I think I'm more of a guzzler than a spoilsport, but that's a little honest thing for myself. And the paradox, and again, if you were to choose to look at the NHS advice on the ways to have good mental health, it always includes this: doing things for other people. Altruism, actually sacrificing yourself for the sake of others, seems to lead to extremely good mental health for yourself. That doesn't, you think, but hedonism is just, all I want is pleasure for myself. Yet when I really, really want to have pleasure for myself, they say, then you need to do something for others. So, if I do have a conclusion from my little wanderings through this, and it's a real paradox, I think you have to conclude that there is no overriding truth or purpose. But in order for me to survive as a human being, I have to have an overriding meaning and purpose. You see that paradox in there? But I guess the humility needs to be to recognise that your overriding meaning and purpose may not be the same as mine, but it's vitally important that you have it too. And if I want to be happy, then having that purpose in my life is more important than just seeking pleasure. Longing matters. Doing for others matters. Having a purpose matters. And I always often come at this point to another paradox. People need the Unitarians, but they're not here. And that's maybe a question we should ask ourselves. Are we selling ourselves short? Now, as I was correctly... Oh no, sorry, I need to say a prayer first before we go to our next hymn. So let's just say some prayers. Let's just spend a bit of time thinking about those who are feeling suicidal, because there is no point to their lives. Let's just imagine what that must feel like. But let's also think of those for whom a purpose in their life seems to destroy other lives. For those whose purpose is to utterly destroy the state of Israel, and those whose purpose is to destroy the people living in Gaza. For those who have been told by their government that their purpose is to conquer the people of the Ukraine. And for those for whom dying to save the Ukraine is more important than anything else. For all those whose purpose in life leads to violence, and those who suffer as a result. Think about those for whom personal pleasure is got at the expense of others, where violence becomes personal. For those who are trafficked for the sexual desire of others. And so think of ourselves and our overriding purpose and meaning in life. And pray that it may make the world a better place. And that we can sleep at night knowing that we do what makes sense to us and for the benefit of all. And we say together, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. So, I'm going to put out the chalice. But as it goes, let its light shine in our hearts. May our meaning and purpose enhance the world, and may it be better all who live within it. Lovely to be with you. Let's depart in peace. Have a drink first.
Yeah.
And I'll see you back here in 2 weeks.
Well.